Hey everybody, what's up? Fuller here. Thanks for checking out the channel. Welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to show you the top 10 MetaSound nodes that you need to know. These nodes are going to save you a ton of time, and not just nodes, a couple other little tricks and stuff I'm going to show you along the way. But if you watch this video and you're new to MetaSounds, it's going to save you a lot of time and headache, I promise. So let's jump right in. All right, so I have a MetaSound open here. The first node I want to talk about is actually an interface, and it's called One Shot. Okay, when you add the one-shot interface to your MetaSound, you're going to get this on-finished node, okay? And let's read this warning. On-finished should be connected for one-shot MetaSound sources. For sources with undefined duration, i.e. looping, remove the one-shot interface and use an audio component to avoid leaking the source. Okay, so the purpose of this node is, right now I have a music here, but let me just pull up a little short sound, okay? And we're just going to play this. So there's your sound, and the sound is done. But if you notice, the MetaSound keeps running because this MetaSound is actually a graph. It's not just a sound. This wave player is triggering a wave on this graph. So what you got to do is you got to tell the MetaSound that when this is done playing, I want you to kill it. So watch now. Play it, play the sound, and then this gets triggered and the MetaSound stops running. The reason this is important is because if you don't do this, every sound you play is going to keep running that MetaSound graph. So eventually your CPU is going to get overloaded with a bunch of sounds that you're not using. So when a MetaSound is running, it's using memory. And so this node actually notifies the MetaSound to, as soon as the audio is done, to go ahead and kill it. Now, here's the trick with this. What this node is doing, it's actually letting Unreal know that this is a one-shot sound, meaning this is a fire and forget, and then let's get this out, let's manage this memory garbage, and let's not let this build up. But here's the thing you need to know, and this is going to save you a lot of time. As long as this interface is on this graph, as far as Unreal is concerned, this is not a looping sound. So even if I loop it, or whatever I do, or I just let it play, it's going to tell Unreal that this is not a looping sound. The problem with this is when it comes to attenuation. So this is a common problem. I even experienced this when I first started using MetaSounds. Is you have, let's say here, I've got this actor here, and I've got this ball that represents where my MetaSound is. And this yellow dome is our attenuation circle. Attenuation is what determines how loud the sound should be as you get closer. So what happens is, here, let me show you this. Let me get rid of this unfinished node. Okay, so now we have a true, and let me just play, let's change this to music, and let's loop this. Okay, so now we have a true looping MetaSound. This is never going to stop. But let's also, we've got attenuation on this. We got attenuation on this MetaSound. And if you look down here, we have this attenuation. So if we look here in voice management, we've got a virtualization mode. Virtualization behavior, determining if a sound may revive and how it continues to play when culled or evicted. Basically, attenuation. So when you leave an attenuation circle, that sound stops. And when you go back in, the sound starts back. And this mode here tells us how we're going to do it. We can disable it, which means it won't do it. We can play when silent, means it's just going to continue to play, and then when you walk back in, it's going to pick up where it left off, or we can restart it, which means when you walk into the attenuation circle, it's going to restart. So let's watch this. Let's check this out. So I'm going to walk inside this circle, and now you hear the music. As I get closer to the sphere, it gets louder, and then as I get further away, it stops. Eventually, we leave this attenuation sphere, and the sound stops. Let's actually do a debug here just to show this. We're going to go au.debug sounds 1. Now, watch this. We got nothing playing, and then as soon as we get inside the attenuation sphere, our MetaSound is playing. And there's the distance. We're at 760. When we get out to about 1300, it stops. So 1300 is our cutoff. And then it stops right there. Now, that's how it's supposed to work. But look what happens if we leave this one-shot on-finished node here. I'm not even going to hook it up. I'm just going to leave it here. Okay, we got the sound looping. It should be looping, but we have this on-finished node. Now watch this. Now let's go to the debug. Okay, now As we go closer, no sound, okay? We're inside the sphere, we're inside the attenuation circle, but we're not getting any sound. Why is that? Well, that's because we left this onFinish node on the graph. Now, I'm telling you, this happens all the time. It happened to me, it happens to almost everyone I know. So if this is the only part of the video you watch, this is going to be worth the price of admission, which is free, by the way. All my videos are free. Oh, and there you go. So that is our first node, the onFinish node. The second node, and this is actually also an interface I want to show you, is the attenuation interface. So if we go here and we add the attenuation interface, and then we can go out here, and now we've got this distance. What this is the distance from the player to the sound source, to this MetaSound. So I'm going to just attach this to pitch shift, and let's see what happens as we get closer to our sound. Oh, it's way too fast. All right. But this is going to be crazy. So let's clamp this value. We're going to map this range. We're going to say the input is from 1300 to 300, because that's about what we're going to get. And we're going to output that to, let's go -5 to 5. Now we're going to hear this music change pitch. Here we go. So the further we get, the music pitch is changing. There you go. So this is just a really easy way for any of your MetaSounds to get the distance from the player or the listener. And this is a really important node. Our next node that I want to talk about is the interp node. What the interp node is, here let's just call it up, interp2. What this does is this changes from one value to another value over an amount of time. So the way we're going to do this is we are going to set this to the pitch. And what I want to do, you need to use this in tandem with another node called value float. And so what this node is going to do is it's actually going to set one, here's our initial value, so let's set this at 0, and our target value is going to be 5. So we're going to pitch this up 5 semitones over time, and that's going to drag out to our target. Let's do this over 3 seconds. So now when I play, I'm going to hook the play up to here, and then on set, I'm going to play this MetaSound. Now, when we start this MetaSound, for now I want to get rid of that. So now what I want to do is I want to get rid of the attenuation, which I've already done. I'm going to drag my MetaSound right here. So as soon as I hit play, that MetaSound's going to play. When it plays, it's going to interp from 0 to 5, and it's going to route that to the pitch, and it's going to slowly interp that for 3 seconds. So let's check that out. Here we go. There you go, and then it kind of stables out. And you could change that. Let's change that to an octave over 12 seconds. There you go, there's our octave. Okay, so you can see this node is very powerful. You can use this for a lot of different things. It's definitely a node you're going to want to have at your disposal. And this is something that you can trigger at any time. It doesn't have to be on play. It could be, it could have its own input, and you could just come off here. You could create another input called set, and then while you're playing your sound, and then whenever you trigger this input, it will start the interp. Very powerful node. All right, the next node I want to show you is the random node. And this is going to be used a lot, especially if you're doing procedural music. And what this does is it basically just creates, when it's triggered, it sets a random, for this one we're going to do a random float. You can do random ints, you can do random bools, but now we're just going to do a random float, and we're going to go from -5 to 5. And so what this is going to do is when I play it, it's actually, let's get rid of this. It's going to randomly pick a node, randomly pick a number, and then it's going to set that number. Let's put this into the log. We're going to do a print log here also, and we're going to call this pitch. So now, when I hit play, we're going to see information come up here. Here we go. So that was 4.6.4. Let's do it again. Now we're at 4.2. Let's do it again. Now we're at negative 2.24. So every time I hit play, it's going to generate a new random number. You can also set the seed value, and what the seed value does is it ensures that the randomness is the same every time. So you could, if you put that at 0, you're always going to get the same random numbers. They'll still be random, but it will be seeded to make sure it's a specific string of random numbers. So you can use this node a lot. You can do random int, you can do random float, random time, random bool, and all that stuff. So this is a really good tool for creating procedural music where you don't want it to be predictive. All right, let's talk about the crossfade node. The crossfade node is a little confusing, but it's really important. So we're going to come out here and let's add a crossfade. And you've got several options to choose from, all the way up to 8 channels. So we're going to do crossfade audio, and let's do 2 of them. So what I want to do is I'm going to create another wave player, and I'm going to play both of these at the same time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to send the out of one to the first one, and I'm going to send the out of the other one to the second one. Okay. Then I'm going to connect that to the output. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select an input just so I have it, so I can show you. And let's change this to a fader, a slider. Okay. So what this is going to do, the slider is going to slide between these 2 values. Now what I want to do is, so we know which one is which, I'm going to pitch this one down an octave. So when I hit play, we hear this one. Now watch what happens when I crossfade. So now we're 100% input 1. Let's go back. So we're switching octaves. Now let's turn this one up an octave. And let's turn this one down an octave. Now we're going to hear a real drastic difference. So here's the one down an octave. Now we're going to crossfade up. Here's both of them. There you go. So what we're doing essentially is we're crossfading between this one and this one with a normalized float value of 0 to 1. Now, the way this crossfade works, and this is important to understand, when you have 2 audio, 0 is 100% the first input, and 1 is 100% the second input, meaning 0.5, which is half, is exactly half of each, so you'll hear both of them. So now, actually, let's do a different sound here. Okay, yeah, let's use this. And let's put it back to 0, and I want to loop this sound. There we go. So we got that, and let's shift this up so it's a little more audible. Here we go. So that's half of both, and that's all of the second one. Now, why this is important is because when we get into 3 sources, let's say we have 3 sources. And so let me add another one. And let's make this one... let's do that one and loop that. Okay. Now I'm going to loop from 3 sources. This will be 2, this will be 1, this will be 0, and then here's my crossfade value. And then let me set this to the output. Now we have 3 sources. Now check this out, and this is where it gets a little complicated. So what I got to do now is I've got to change this value to 2. Because when you have 3, you have 0, 1, and 2. So you have 3 values. 0 is 100% source 1. 1 is 100% source 2. And 2 is 100% third source. So now when we play this, we got 100% 1, 100% 2, and 100% 3. So if I want to mix between 3 and 2, I'll put it at about 1.5. And if I want to mix between 1 and 2, I'll put it about 0.5. So as you add audio sources, you have to add a range of your volume. So if you have 3, then you have 0, 1, and 2. If you have 4, you have 0, 1, 2, and 3. So you see what I'm saying? So if you have a 4-source audio, all the way to 3 is 100% the 4th source. So you got to kind of keep in mind, because these are indexed at 0 too. So 0, 1, 2, which actually source 1, source 2, and source 3. So a very powerful node. It's a really great way to quickly crossfade between audio sources. Now I want to talk about on nearly finished. The on nearly finished is a very important node, and here's why. So let's get the sound. All right, that sound's done. So now if we grab this on nearly finished, we can actually create a variable called on nearly finished. And the reason why this is important, because on nearly finish gives you the frame right before it's over, okay? And the reason that's important is because we can actually do looping back. So I can go and I can grab this, instead of grabbing this on nearly finished variable, I can actually do an alt drag and I can get a delayed, okay? So I can get this delayed on finished. And so what this does is this delays it by 1 frame. And so what I can do is I can come in here, and so let's say I do any 2. We'll go any 2. And I'll hit play. I'm not going to loop this. It's just going to play it and stop it. Now, I can get this delayed on nearly finished, and then I can actually play it again. So now what I'm doing is I'm creating a loop based on the length of this audio asset, which is really important and really comes in handy. Now, if I didn't have this, if I didn't get this delayed, it would actually not let me set it up here. You see it says connection causes a loop. So by getting on nearly finished and then getting a delayed on nearly finished, this one notifies it a frame before and this starts it a frame after. So now we have a seamless loop. Now you might be asking, well, why not just loop it? The problem with just looping is you don't know how long the audio file is. So if you do it this way, you can string a bunch of audio files together based on their length without having to know their length. So because Unreal knows their length and it knows exactly which frame to trigger this. So this is a very powerful tool. So if you're ever messing around and you're trying to hook something up and it says connection causes a loop, that's when you want to do a on nearly finished and a get delayed by holding Alt and dragging it, and then you'll see this timer. That's a delayed get, and then you can bypass that loop. Now the other node I wanted to talk to you about, I just showed you, is the any trigger. So the any trigger allows you to trigger anything into this and then trigger out. And the reason you need to do this is because once if I hook this up to here to play, I can no longer hook another trigger up to play. It won't let me. It'll only let you do one trigger because these aren't executions. These are actually triggering on a graph. They're time stamping these triggers and when they should happen. So only one thing can happen here. But what this node allows you to do is it allows you to combine different triggers so that you can do that that way. So if I hit play, now I got play, and I can hit this one, and that's going to trigger that out. And so it's just a really handy tool. Also, say you have 2 wave players of different lengths, and you want them both to kill your sound. Here, let's go here. So then what you can do, if let's say you don't know which one it's going to trigger. So we have like a random triggering, and you don't know which one it's going to trigger that one. Maybe there's a filter here. Maybe there's a filter. Maybe this is a probability. Here's a trigger filter, free node here. So we're going to go heads and tails and probability half. So we don't know which one of these is going to trigger, but we also want to add an on finished node. How do we know which one to trigger? Because you can't hook up both of these to the on finished. So what you have to do is you use an any2 or however many sources you have, and then you can hook that up to there and that up to the on finished, and then this one. That way, no matter which one plays, it will do an on finished trigger. And then let's look up this output as well. So let's add a mixer here. Add a 2-channel mixer. There you go. All right, so now we're going to depending on which wave plays, is going to trigger the on finish. So let's move this up here so you can see it. Here we go. So that's the bass, and then when it's done, it's going to trigger on finish and stop the MetaSound. There you go. So the any trigger really comes in handy when you want to drive a bunch of triggers into the same trigger. Okay, so let's say we've got an input. We want to bring this out to an input, and we have pitch shift, and we want to change it. But let's say we also want to do something else when we change it. Right now, here, let's put the music here and loop that. Right now, if I can change this in real time. But let's say when I change that, I want something else to happen. This is where on value change comes in handy. So if I go on value change float, I can set this here. And what this will do is this will fire this trigger as soon as that value is changed. So I can actually come in here and create a trigger just by the value change. So now, let's go here. Let's go to this output log. Okay, let's come over here. Let's look at this value here. Now when I change this, watch this. It's gonna print that. It's gonna fire this node. If I change it again, every time I change it, it's firing that node. Very handy tool, because a lot of times you'll have a input change into a MetaSound and you want that to cause an action, a trigger. And so by using the on value change, any value change can cause a trigger. So if you're using, say you have an integer that's being fed to your MetaSound, and if it's 0, it's the intro, and if it's 1, it's the verse, and if it's 2, it's the chorus. But when that number gets set, you want the MetaSound to trigger something, a wave or something. This is how you would use this node. So you could just set it up on an input, and then whenever that value changes, it will cause a trigger to happen. Another really important tool is trigger control. And you notice if I type gate, it comes up. And what this is this is basically a gate that allows triggers to pass. So if I do trigger in and I start closed, I hear nothing. I hear no sound. If I start open, it will play my MetaSound. And let's pitch that back down to 0 so it's not annoying. Okay, so now where this comes in handy is, let's say this sound is this. All right, let's say I got the hand clap. And let's say I do a repeat trigger. And I'm just repeating this every 1 second. So if I repeat out and I got the trigger in, what it's going to do, it's going to keep playing that. However, let's say I want to close that. I can come off here and I can create an input. And now watch this. I can close this gate at any time, and now the trigger is not passing. Oh, I'm looping. Let me turn that loop off. Here we go. So there we go. So it's open. Now I'm going to close it. Now it's not letting pass. I could set this to the toggle as well. And so now I can close it, and then open it, and then close it, and then open it. And so there's a lot of cool things you can do with this. This comes in real handy with procedural music, because what it allows you to do is it allows you to randomly open and close things. And what's really cool about this is it allows you to externally fire inputs from your blueprints or your game thread, but you can lock them into this trigger. So you could have a trigger repeat, making sure that this is staying on beat, right? And then I could close that, and it's still on beat. So the next time I open it, it will still be on beat. So it's a really powerful node. And the last nodes I want to show you, which are really important, very powerful, and these are just math nodes. So let's just set a float value, random float value from 0 to 1, and then we're going to play that. And we're going to do that to pitch. So now we're getting random numbers sent to the pitch. With math, what we can do now is we can come out here and we can type math, and we get all these. We can add. So we could say, okay, I want you to add an octave. And so whatever random number I get is now an octave higher. Or let's say I could minus, or they call it subtract. We could subtract a major fifth. Let's go -7. So now it's generating a random number, but it's subtracting an octave. You could modulo or divide. You could divide it, divide float. And you could say, you know what, let's cut that and divide by 2. So we're going to cut that in half. And so whatever it is, now you're getting it. So with this math stuff is really powerful. There's also one more node I want to show you called modulo. So let's say I get a random int. Now if I come off here and I type math, I want to show you this modulo. Modulo is a really powerful tool. What is modulo? Well, what modulo does is it divides your number by whatever. So let's say modulo 2 is very popular. So if I have a random integer between 1 and 10, 0, let's say I have it between 1 and 10. Now, and on value change, because we know that node now, I want to print int to the log, okay? And we'll call this modulo results. Now check this out. I want to show you something here. Print that to there. Okay. So when I hit play, modulo results 1. Now here's what I want to show you. I also want to, when I trigger this, I also want to print the actual number. Every time I do this, I want to print the actual number that's generating and the modulo 2. And check this out. So we've got 1, random 1, modulo 1. Let me spell that right. This is going to bother me. Okay. Let's go here. 7, random int 7, modulo 1. Random int 10, modulo 0. Okay. Random int 2, modulo 0. And let's see here. Random 6, modulo 0. Random 8, modulo 0. Random 7, modulo 1. So what's happening here? Well, this is really important, especially when it comes to procedural music generation. With the modulo, what you can do is you can take any random string of integers, 0 to infinite, and you can modulo to it. What this does is the modulo divides it by 2, and it basically asks, what's the remainder? So 5 divided by 2 is 2 with a remainder of 1. So 5 modulo 2 is 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3 with no modulo. So what this allows us to do is this allows us to take any random integer and find out right away whether it's odd or even. So if you modulo 2 an integer, if there's no remainder, it's an even number. If there's a remainder of 1, then it's an odd number. And so this is a really powerful tool, and this is used a lot in coding because especially musical, if you think about it, music happens a lot on odd and even beats. Like 1 and 3 would be downbeats, 2 and 4 would be upbeats. So you can use this procedurally in your music to go, oh, if it's an odd number, then we're going to call that a downbeat. If it's an even number, we're going to call that an upbeat. So you can see where this function is really powerful for finding out whether something is odd or even. You can also modulo 3, which would basically tell you, is it divisible by 3? Is it a factor of 3? So there's a lot of really cool things that you can do with the modulo. Well, that's it for this video. I hope that these 10 plus a few bonuses in there, MetaSound nodes, was really helpful. Please, if you haven't already, like and subscribe to the channel. Feel free to comment as well so we can build community. And I hope that you enjoyed yourself this time, and we'll see you in the next video.